They said the child came with the morning birds. At the small health center, near the red hills of Mutego, just before the sun broke through the mist, a cry rang out, sharp, new, and full of life. It was a baby boy, wrapped in white cloth and laid gently on his mother's chest. His fingers were tiny but strong, his cry full of energy, and his skin was dark and smooth like fresh clay after rain. Naomi, his mother, was tired but smiling. She had pushed and labored through the night, with only the nurse and the old midwife by her side. Her husband David had waited outside under the mango tree, praying quietly and pacing like a restless goat. When they told him it was a boy, David clapped his hands and shouted with joy, "Emmanuel! His name is Emmanuel!" He rushed in, held his wife's hand, and looked at the baby like he had just seen a miracle. Naomi smiled again, though her body ached. "You can hold him," she said softly. But David just stood there, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "No, not yet. He still smells like heaven." By the time they returned to the village of Kisoro, news had already spread. A child had been born into the Kintu family, and not just any child, a boy, firstborn, son of David, grandson of a respected elder. Women began arriving with pots of porridge. Men stood outside, hands behind their backs, talking in low tones. Old Mzee Kalema, David's uncle, came with 2 walking sticks and a voice that still carried weight, even though his eyes had grown cloudy with age. "He must be blessed before the sun circles 7 times, Mzee Kalema declared. Naomi blinked. "What kind of blessing?" "Eh," the old man laughed. "You are new here, daughter. These are family ways. Don't ask too many questions." And just like that, plans began to move like a river after rain. A hut was swept, a chicken was bought, banana leaves were gathered. The baby, only 3 days old, was passed from hand to hand like a prize calabash. Naomi watched it all, her arms folded across her chest. She had grown up in town. Her people prayed in church, sang hymns, and poured blessings through words, not through objects. But this was her husband's family, and she wanted to respect their ways. Still, something in her belly turned, not like pain, but like a warning knocking softly from the inside. The sun had barely climbed over the tall avocado trees when Naomi's friends came to visit. They were old schoolmates from her younger days in Bunono, the town where she had grown up. Akello and Lydia arrived with quiet laughter and a basket full of small gifts, sugar, soap, and 2 cloth wrappers for the baby. They kissed Naomi's cheeks and clapped softly when they saw Emmanuel sleeping. "He has your lips," Akello whispered. "But David's nose," Lydia added. The 3 women sat under the shade of a guava tree with hot tea and boiled cassava on a woven mat. The village was quiet, except for the distant sound of a rooster refusing to mind the time. At first the talk was soft and happy. They asked how the labor went, how the baby fed, whether David was helping. But then Akello leaned in and asked, "Naomi, have they said anything to you about the blessing?" Naomi nodded. "Yes. David's uncle wants to do it before the week ends. He says it's a family tradition." The 2 women looked at each other. Lydia sighed and picked at the edge of her mat. "Do you know what they mean by blessing?" Naomi frowned. "Well, not exactly. But David said it's harmless, just prayer and giving thanks." Akello's voice lowered. "Naomi, be careful. Some of these blessings, they are not what you think." Naomi tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "They say it's prayer," Lydia said, "but some of them take the child away from the mother. They do things alone, in places where no woman is allowed. We've heard stories. One baby was taken at dawn, and when he returned, he didn't cry the same again. Another, Akello added, was taken to the family's old shrine. They called it a blessing, but the mother said the child started falling sick after that. She left the village. No one talks about her anymore." Naomi felt something cold in her chest. She looked down at Emmanuel, asleep beside her, His fingers curled like small beans. She had known things would be different here, but not like this. "I will talk to David again," she said, more to herself than to them. Akello placed her hand gently on Naomi's arm. "Don't wait too long. Once they begin, you cannot stop it. Some blessings you don't come back from." The next morning, as the mist cleared from the grass and the chickens began their noisy patrol, Naomi stood in the doorway of the main house, holding her baby close to her chest. She had made her decision. David was sitting under the pawpaw tree, peeling sugarcane with his small pocket knife. His eyes were tired and his shirt was stained with dust. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Our son slept well last night," he said. Naomi nodded. "Yes, he's strong." There was a silence between them, full but not heavy. Then Naomi cleared her throat. "David," she began, "I want to take Emmanuel to church on Sunday, to be prayed for by the pastor." David stopped peeling. His fingers paused mid-slice. "Church?" "Yes. I want him to be blessed in a way I understand, with prayer and hands on his head, with words spoken to God." David looked down. "You know how my family is. They will not like this." Naomi took a step closer. "But I am his mother, and I also come from people. My way is prayer too." Before David could answer, his aunt, Mama Jalia, stepped out from the kitchen with a steaming pot in her hand. "What's this I'm hearing?" she said, her voice sharp like a sugarcane leaf. "You want to take the child to church before the family has blessed him?" Naomi stood her ground. "Yes, Mama Jalia. I want to take him for a prayer of thanksgiving. Is there harm in that?" The older woman laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You people from town, you think your prayers are better than the ones of your ancestors? This child must first be accepted by the clan. Only after that can he go to church. Otherwise, you are giving him to strangers." Naomi's eyes burned, but she did not cry. "My church is not full of strangers." More footsteps came. An uncle appeared, then another elder. The talk turned into a wall of voices. "The baby is not yours alone. He must know where he comes from. You cannot take him without the family's word." Naomi's heart pounded, not just from anger, but from fear. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. This was not about prayer. This was not about thanks. This was not even about culture. They wanted to perform something on her child, something they could not name, and worse, they wanted to do it without her. She held her baby tighter and stepped back into the house. She would not wait for permission. That night, the wind refused to sleep. It blew gently through the banana trees, rustled the grass, and knocked lightly on the windows of the back hut, the small round one where the elders kept their things. The moon sat high, watching everything, silver and full of knowing. Naomi could not rest. She lay beside Emmanuel, who slept with his mouth slightly open, one hand on her chest like he was holding on to her heartbeat. David had gone quiet since the morning argument. He had barely spoken, only nodding and mumbling to the elders when they passed. But Naomi's mind was not quiet. It was loud with questions, loud with the voices of her friends, loud with the feeling that something was being planned behind her back. And so, when the baby finally drifted into a deep sleep, Naomi slipped from the bed, tied a shawl around her shoulders, and tiptoed outside. The compound was still. A goat chewed lazily in the corner. Far off, a hyena called. She walked toward the back hut. This hut was older than the others, its mud walls rough and its roof sunken like an old man's shoulders. During the day it was locked, but tonight the door was slightly open, like someone had forgotten to close it properly, or like something inside wanted to be seen. Naomi stepped inside. At first it was just dark, but after a few seconds, her eyes adjusted. There, on a low stool, was a small knife. Beside it, a shallow wooden bowl filled with gray ash. A gourd, thick and brown, with carvings that looked like snakes or rivers. Banana leaves were folded carefully in a corner, tied with sisal string. She stood still. Then she heard footsteps, soft but steady, coming closer. Naomi's heart leapt into her throat. She turned quickly and slipped out of the hut, moving fast but silent like a cat chased from a cooking pot. She ducked behind the cooking shelter and waited. 2 men passed by. One was Mzee Kalema. The other she could not see clearly. They didn't notice her. They just entered the hut, speaking in low tones. "She must not know," one said. "It is not for women to ask." Naomi stayed hidden until they left. Then she crept back into the house, her hands shaking, her breath short. She lay beside her baby again and watched him sleep. Now she was sure. Whatever they called a blessing was something they feared to explain, and anything that cannot be explained must be questioned. Morning came with the smell of millet porridge and the soft cries of cocks chasing the sun. But inside Naomi's heart, nothing felt like morning. She had not slept. Her mind was still inside the back hut, with the knife, the ash, the gourd, and the whispers she had heard. That day, the compound was busy. A woman came to sweep the yard. A boy arrived with a rooster tied upside down, its feathers shaking with every step. More elders appeared, some she had not seen since the wedding. Naomi sat on the porch, her baby on her lap, pretending to watch the chickens. But her eyes were sharp. She saw the way Mzee Kalema moved about, giving orders with his fingers. She saw the banana leaves being washed. She saw someone hang a piece of white cloth inside the same old hut. And then she heard them talking again, but this time in hushed Luganda, thinking she could not understand. Before sunset, the child's blood must touch the gourd. Even if she cries, she will not stop us. Naomi stood. She walked straight to David, who was sitting near the water tank, pretending to read something on his phone. "David," she said, "I saw what's inside that hut." He looked up slowly. "I saw the knife. I saw the gourd. I heard what they're planning." David said nothing at first. Then he sighed. "It's not as bad as it looks." "Then tell me," she said, her voice steady. "What exactly do they plan to do to Emmanuel?" David's eyes dropped to the dust. "It's just to protect him. It's an old way. They did it to me, too." Naomi blinked. "Did they cut you?" David didn't answer. "Did they take you from your mother?" Still, he said nothing. "I'm not allowing it," she said. "Not now. Not ever." "You don't understand," he whispered. "If we refuse, they'll say we brought a curse. They'll say the child will not belong to the clan." Naomi held her baby tighter. "He does not belong to a clan. He belongs to God and to us." David rubbed his face, torn between 2 worlds. "They won't listen to you, Naomi." "Then they'll hear me when I leave," she said. The sun was high, and the air had grown hot and heavy, like it was listening to something it could not stop. Naomi had not eaten. Her baby had fed and fallen asleep again, unaware that something was boiling in the hearts of grown people. Mzee Kalema sat under the avocado tree, surrounded by 2 other elders and David's aunt, Mama Jalia. They were waiting for the final sign, the moment they would say it was time. Naomi stepped into the center of the compound, her baby wrapped against her chest, her back straight like a tree refusing to bend. "I have something to say," she began. The talking stopped. Even the goats nearby seemed to pause. "I gave birth to this child with my blood and my breath. I held him first. I named him Emmanuel, and I will not allow any hand to touch him without my knowing." Mama Jalia scoffed. "You speak too proudly for a woman who just entered this family." "And you hide too much for people who claim to bless," Naomi replied. One elder stood, shaking his head. "You are breaking a sacred order, daughter. The child is not only yours, he is ours." Naomi nodded slowly. "Yes, but if he is yours, why must I be kept outside the hut? Why are the women not allowed to see the blessing? Why must the gourd be hidden and the knife be quiet?" The elder said nothing. David stood behind the crowd, silent, his eyes full of shame. "I was raised differently," Naomi continued. "In my family, blessings are spoken, not cut, not hidden, not feared." "She will bring trouble," Mama Jalila hissed. Naomi took one step forward. "I will take my baby far from here if I must, and I will raise him with peace, not fear." Mzee Kalema's voice finally came, old and low like a drum at night. "You dare defy us, girl?" Naomi looked him in the eye. "I dare protect my child." And then she turned and walked into the house. The wind followed her. That night, the sky held its breath. No stars blinked. Even the insects made less noise than usual, as if the world itself was waiting to see what Naomi would do. Inside the house, Emmanuel slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling like a tide. Naomi sat beside him, eyes wide open, a small bag packed at her feet. She had not told David. She had spoken her truth to the elders. But she knew their silence was not surrender. It was a quiet wait, the way snakes wait in the grass before they strike. Then came a soft knock at the back window. It was Aunt Nambi, David's cousin from the next homestead, a quiet woman, a kind woman, one of the few who had said nothing during the arguments but had watched Naomi with careful eyes. Naomi opened the window. "You must go tonight," Aunt Nambi whispered, "before they rise for the morning prayers. They have decided." Naomi's heart dropped. What have they decided? "They will take the child tomorrow, with or without you. Mzee Kalema says the child is more theirs than yours." Naomi's arms tightened around her baby. "Thank you," she whispered. Aunt Nambi handed her a paper. "This is a number, a friend of mine in Munika town. She has a church. Go there. You'll be safe." Naomi nodded. She tied Emmanuel against her back with a thick cloth, packed her shawl, 2 diapers, and a flask of warm water. She left the rest. At the door, she paused to look once more at the compound, the mango trees, the small hut, the steps where she and David had once laughed over roasted maize. She placed a small note on the table. It read, "I am protecting our son. One day, I hope you will understand." Then she stepped out into the darkness. The path to the road was narrow, but she knew it now like a song. The dust was soft under her feet. The baby stirred, but did not cry. Even he, it seemed, knew they had to go. At the edge of the road, a boda waited, an old friend of Aunt Nambi. He nodded once, no questions asked. And just like that, before the first rooster crowed, Naomi was gone. Morning came, but Naomi was not there. The bed was empty. The baby's cloths were gone. And on the table sat a single piece of paper, fluttering gently in the morning breeze. David found it first. He read it once, then again. "I am protecting our son. One day, I hope you will understand." His hands trembled. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, not speaking, not blinking. In the compound, Mama Jalila shouted, "She has escaped! That stubborn woman has taken the child!" Mzee Kalema came out slowly, his face twisted with anger. "We warned her," he muttered. "Now let her face the curse alone." Another elder spat on the ground. "That boy will never know where he comes from. He will grow up lost." But David said nothing. He walked to the back hut. The door was still open from the preparations the night before. The knife lay unused, the gourd untouched, the white cloth still hanging like a ghost waiting to be called. For the first time, he asked himself, why? Why had no one ever told him the meaning of these things? Why had he agreed to something he didn't understand? Why had he let his wife feel alone in her own home? He sat on the step for a long time. Villagers came, some to gossip, others to blame. One even said Naomi had bewitched him, made him weak. But David was not listening. In his chest, a slow understanding began to grow, like firewood that finally catches flame, even after too much smoke. He had tried to be obedient, tried to honor the elders, but now he saw the cost. He had lost his wife, his child, his peace. And all because he kept quiet when he should have spoken. It took David 3 days to gather courage, 3 days of silence in the compound, 3 days of elders muttering and blaming, 3 days of walking past the baby's empty cloths and hearing nothing but his own thoughts echoing in his chest. On the 4th day, before sunrise, David packed a small bag and left Kisoro. He asked around. Some refused to speak. Others said nothing but gave him looks filled with judgment. Only one young Boda rider, the same one who had helped Naomi, finally pointed him toward Munika town. She went that way, the rider said, with her head high and her back strong. It was a long road. The dust rose behind his shoes and the sun burned gently on his shoulders. When he reached the edge of Munika, he found the church easily. It was small, built with hand-mixed cement, painted in peeling blue, and shaded by 2 jacaranda trees. In the yard, clothes hung on a line, and children's laughter spilled through the windows. He stood at the gate for a long time. Then Naomi came out. She was holding Emmanuel, who had grown more alert, more curious. The boy looked at David like he was just another man passing by. Naomi didn't speak. David stepped forward, removed his hat, and lowered his eyes. "I came to say sorry," he said. The wind moved through the trees above them. "I should have listened. I should have protected you. I thought I was doing what a son must do, but I forgot what it means to be a father." Naomi looked down at their child, who now gripped her necklace with both hands. "I was scared," David said. "Scared to stand alone, scared to lose favor with the elders. But I lost something greater." Still, Naomi said nothing. "I don't ask you to come back," David said quietly, "only that you forgive me, and that one day our son will know his father tried to be brave, even if it came late." Naomi looked up at him. Her face was not soft, but it was not closed either. She nodded once, and that was enough. Naomi did not return to Kisoro. Instead, she stayed in Munika, where the air was quieter and her feet could move freely without stepping on anyone's pride. She joined a women's group at the church, learned how to bake bread and plant herbs behind the house. Emmanuel grew fast. He had David's eyes and Naomi's stubborn lips. He laughed easily, ate well, and clapped whenever he heard singing. David visited often. Not with demands, not with elders, not with words meant to win. He came with respect. Sometimes he brought diapers, other times just stories. Once he came with a small wooden box carved with the baby's name, Emmanuel. Inside, he had written a note. "Your mother taught me courage. You will know her strength and walk in it." Back in Kisoro, the elders still muttered. Mzee Kalema warned that the child would grow up without proper grounding. But one by one, the village women began to ask questions too. Why must blessings be hidden? Why must mothers be pushed away? Why must tradition fear the light? David never argued with the elders again. He simply said, "Not my child." Naomi, for her part, forgave quietly. She didn't forget, but she understood. Change is slow, like a river carving stone. One Sunday, as the choir sang and sunlight poured through the small church windows, Naomi held Emmanuel close. His eyes followed the colored glass. His fingers clutched her thumb. He was safe. He was whole. No knife had touched him. No gourd had claimed him. Only love. Only a mother's voice and the prayer of a woman who stood when others expected her to sit. And in that quiet, sunlit room, where drums tapped softly and women swayed with joy, Naomi smiled. She had not run away. She had walked forward. Stories connect us to our past, shape our present, and guide our future. African Legends and Stories is more than just storytelling. It is a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow, between tradition and modernity. Subscribe now and be part of this journey. Like, comment, and share to keep these legends alive. This is African Legends and Stories, where the past speaks and the future listens.